Hi, everybody, and welcome back to week 7 of Joyful Journeys in our fall 2024 season. It is crazy to think we are almost at the finish line for all of our Girls on the Run participants who have glowed and growed over the season. This week, we are focusing at practice on how we compromise. So, how we learn to share our ideas, how we learn to be accepting of others' ideas while being able to meet somewhere in the middle. And we thought there's no one better to talk to about compromise than an attorney. So I am thrilled to be joined today by Donya Gordon, who's an attorney with Ramsey and Gordon Associates. Donya, hello, and thank you for being.
Hi, Ashley. Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Yes, yes, we're so excited to have you here. You're the first attorney that I can think of that we've had on
Yay.
Nice. So go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself and your career journey in the legal field.
Okay, so my journey, I was an accountant, um, have an accounting degree, worked as an accountant. And then I just thought I had a girlfriend who was going to law school and was having a hard time, and she kept calling, and I was kind of mentoring her. And I was like, I think I could do that. So I studied for the bar, took the bar, went to law school. My second semester, we had a choice of getting an international certificate in White Plains, New York, or in London, England. I said that's not a choice, and I went to London. It was the best thing I ever did. Came back, worked for AM 100 firms, and then I sat on a trading desk for 7 years, then transitioned into judicial clerk, hearing officer, and all of that. So my experience is very diverse, and
Yeah,
so it helps me with my clients in giving them a holistic approach from the business side to the legal side. So it's great. I'm grateful.
yeah, it sounds amazing that you have that really cool balance between the legal field and the business field as well. And I didn't know that part about London. I lived in London when I did my study abroad, so we'll
It
have
was
to
great.
we'll have to share our favorite memories offline. But yeah, so I mean, being an attorney and also just being in business in general, compromise is a huge role.
It is.
Getting people to see eye to eye. How do you see compromise playing a role in your career?
Well, I think it's important if you're doing business, right? Because generally a contract is a compromise of the parties. Two people come together and say, I want to do this, but somebody has to give up something, or chances are both of you have to give up something to meet in the middle to get to that agreement. So compromise is essential for you to do contracts. But also, when you think of it, should the parties not agree and there's a dispute, there's going to be compromise in settling that dispute. Somebody is going to have to say, okay, you don't have to pay, or you don't have to do this. In order for that to happen, both parties, more than likely, are going to have to compromise. If not, you go to court and the judge will force you to compromise. But it's better that you do it yourself.
Yeah, yeah, and fits in perfectly with what our participants are learning this week. Granted, they're not making business contracts. This week
Not
they're
yet.
not yet. That's the thing. They will be one day.
Yes.
And hopefully they remember what I learned at Girls on the Run when they're sitting at the table making those business contracts and deals. But small scale, they're learning how to make a decision with another youth their age, one of their peers about, well, I want to do X and you want to do Y. What can we do so that we both feel fulfilled and we both feel like we got something, but like you said, you're going to be giving something up at the same time.
Yes. And I think that's important. When I think of the elements of compromise, one party can't always be given
Hmm.
because then they feel like I'm being taken advantage of. And so it's essential for both of you. If you want to do X and that person wants to do Y, well, maybe we do X for an hour and then we do Y for an hour. And then we both get to do something. Or maybe we do X today, all of it, and then tomorrow we do Y, all of it. But at the end of the day, you both have to be giving up something. I think for me, compromise just requires love,
Oh,
thinking of the other person. If I compromise and I say, and I come with it with love, I think it's easier for people to accept rather than, hey, you must do this.
Yeah.
When compromise is not done correctly, it becomes an issue. So I think it's important in how you compromise, not just the compromise itself.
That's so important. And a little bit earlier this season, our girls learned about empathy. And the biggest thing that we teach them in empathy is putting yourself in that other person's shoes to see their perspective. And I think that tool is essential to compromise. It isn't always about ourselves and what we want to
Right,
get. So
right,
frequently, and like you said, as long as we're approaching it with that lens of love and care and kindness and compassion, it
right.
becomes much easier to see something from another person's perspective.
It does. But at the same time, I think with when you deal with girls, we also have to be careful because women have a tendency to always give in.
Mm,
So
totally.
it's okay to compromise, but if you're always the one compromising and always the one giving up, then maybe that's a relationship you need to question or
Mhm.
reevaluate. There's nothing wrong with compromise, but it can't always be you, and it can't always be that you are always giving up everything you want. So
Yeah.
just be mindful with that.
Yeah. And there's a way to be, I think, constructively assertive when you are facing a situation where you do feel the need to stand up for yourself, which is another tool that the girls have learned this season is how to be self advocates, which is
Right.
I think all of it tears up to being able to compromise and ultimately handle conflict. So, kind of with
Agreed.
that, let's talking about the elements of compromise. So, in your opinion, what's something that makes compromise easy? And on the flip side, what's an element of compromise that makes it difficult?
I think for me, as I had said, if one person feels like they're being bullied, so if they're constantly being asked, you should compromise, and the other party isn't compromising,
Mhm.
that doesn't make it easy because then one person just doesn't like that. At the same time, as we talked earlier, if there's love or empathy or kindness with compromise, it's just easier to swallow. It is it goes down easier and you're probably compromising you didn't even realize because it's the way in which it was done. So those to me are important or what I think are elements that help.
That help. Yeah. So, definitely the constant, maybe being on the receiving end of never feeling as your voice is heard. I feel like having your
Right,
voice, just feeling like somebody's hearing you out and compromise. But if you're always on the receiving end of, like you said, you have to compromise, and nothing's going your way, that makes it difficult.
right.
And if you're able to approach it in a spirit of love, it makes it easier.
It does. It does. And so I just think, you know, just watch your relationships in a sense. You can tell who will, give compromise and who won't. So to me, life is a give and take. And so when you're dealing with people, you have to be willing not only to give, but you have to be willing to take. And so if the girls are learning the give and take, as long as it's not detrimental to them, then that's compromise. And I think that's not just a lesson for now. That will carry you through your whole life. So I think that's important.
Yeah, that is so important. I like how you just phrased it as it's a give and a take. And it's such a basic baseline concept that I feel like we as adults, we practice it every day. We practice it with our friends, with our family, with our significant others, with our children.
Right.
And it becomes a natural tool that we use. But we do have to be conscious in developing that same tool in our youth. So,
Right.
on that same kind of thread of how we can develop this tool of compromise, what advice would you give to, and let's say, what advice would you give to adults? And what advice would you give to youth or children when they're dealing with the aftermath of compromise when things didn't go their way? They didn't get what they wanted, which can be the tough pill to swallow of compromise.
It is. So my thing is always communication. You need to talk and say it. Don't assume that they know that I'm annoyed or they know I didn't like that or they know what's going on in my head. You have to be able to speak what you feel and do so in a way of love, whereas the other party doesn't feel offended or have to, put up walls. Just communicate. Hey, you know what? I know I said this, but I didn't like the way that made me feel, or I didn't like the way you received that. Just a simple, but it's important to communicate. And the most important thing after that is don't be bitter.
Mm.
Bitterness is just a poison and it just will poison you more than the other party. So I think communication will avoid the bitterness. But if you don't communicate and you stew, then you become bitter.
Yeah.
So just let it out and just talk. And maybe you might need to walk away for a minute and gather your thoughts before you speak. But then do that, but then be able to speak. So that's what I would give.
Yeah. So if there are any Girls on the Run participants listening to what Donya just said, I hope you heard some familiar things. I heard communicate, which made me think of our I feel statements that the girls learn, where they communicate how they feel with a very
Right.
crafted and thought out statement, where I feel a certain way because of something you did, and I would like for you to. It's a healthy way to communicate our emotions. And I also heard Donya talk about stop and take a breather, which you guys also learned earlier this season, which is sometimes to avoid feeling that bitterness, to avoid feeling like, well, something didn't go my way and I'm just going to stew in my frustration and my upset. Like, okay, let's take some deep breaths. Let's try to let it go and move on and realize that we're not going to be stuck in this moment forever. We've got bigger and brighter things ahead of us too.
Great. Yes, it's important not to be stuck
It
because
is.
then
Mhm.
you're never moving forward. At the end of the day, that happened, and either we address it and deal with it, but we have to be moving forward because being stuck is just not, it's not good for anyone, and it's not an option.
Which I love because that's such the spirit of Girls on the Run is, when we talk about running at practice, we just tell the girls, just move forward. If it's running, walking, if it's skipping, hopping, jumping. And that's so true in life as well.
It is.
When we face an adversity, if we have a compromise that doesn't go our way, we really do have to just keep moving forward and, leave any negative experience in the past, learn from it.
Right,
Um,
right,
never
right.
deny our emotion that occurred with it, but the moving
No.
forward is the most important part.
Yeah, it's important to learn from it so that you're not making that same mistake or not making that same, but then you have to keep moving. You know, it's life, so you have to keep moving.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that you girls have been doing everything.
But I just love how you're like naturally talking, and I'm like, oh my gosh, they've been learning all this already this season. So thinking about, we always like to talk a little bit on the podcast because, we hope that our girls that are participating in the program are listening, and we're hoping that they're listening with their adult in their life.
Right.
Or that our coaches are listening, our teachers at the schools that we work in are listening. So how can adults cultivate compromise skills in youth in their everyday lives when they work with them?
I think the best way to cultivate anything with anyone is by example.
Mm.
So lead by example. Let them see you compromising. Let them see you in how you deal with compromise and how you deal with, oh, I didn't like the way that go. I think an example is the best teacher. So that would be my suggestion. Live out what you want to teach so that it's you're not just saying it, they can actually see it. I think the young people are very keen and they're very they notice everything. And so if this is what you want to teach them, make sure that you're living that way so that they can see, okay, mom handled it that way.
Mhm.
And maybe then this is where I should handle it. My teacher handled it that way. My coach handled it that way. And so it gives them the opportunity, not just for you to tell them how to handle it, but for them to live it out in you in an expression. So I think that's the best way.
That's so true. And I mean, I see it when I coach at Girls on the Run, when I coach in other sports that I'm a part of, children mimic so easily and they're going to mimic what they see around them readily.
Right.
So I think as adults, just giving them the most positive example for them to pick up on and follow is it seems like the simplest thing, but maybe for some
Right.
people they don't. It's a constant reminder, I think, when we're
It is.
adults working with youth that
Yeah.
they're
That
always
they're
watching.
watching.
Yeah.
Yeah. They are watching. They are watching when you get mad and when you lose and you lose your temper because you've lost, you know. So they're watching. So just be mindful, especially when you're working with young people, that they're watching.
Yeah.
So, and though none of us is perfect. And so sometimes you may pull them aside and say, hey, you know what? I lost my temper because this happened. That is not the best example. That's not the way to do. Here is a better way. And let them see, because I mean, we're just human. And even if you realize that you haven't done the best example, don't just leave it like that.
Mhm.
Go and walk them through that and so that they understand that you know that that wasn't the best way to handle it. I think it's, living by example is just the best way.
Yeah, living by example and also being willing to be vulnerable with the kids in our lives. I think that piece is so key of when you're, as an adult, willing to get down to their level and say, yeah, I messed up, but here's
Right.
how I would have liked to have done it better. That is really powerful.
Yeah.
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 Well, this has been phenomenal. Donya,
Thank you.
our first attorney. Um, I'm like such a
Yay.
I'm a legal nerd, so I love talking with people in the legal field. But truly, I mean, compromise is so important, and you are an expert at it because you are
Thank you.
those at those conference tables day in and day out, getting people to see eye to eye and communicate and approach compromise in a spirit of love. So, thank you for sharing your wisdom
Thank
with
you
us.
so much for having me. I really had a great time, and I hope those who are listening enjoyed and learned something from it. So thank you.
Absolutely. All right, everyone, we'll tune back in next week. It is going to be our final week of the fall 2024 season. That 5K is right around the corner, and we cannot wait to see you and celebrate with you. And we will see you all soon.
Everyone.
This episode of Joyful Journeys is brought to you by Girls on the Run of Northern Virginia.